Welcome to another edition of the Bandwagon Podcast, and the particular playlist which I created is the Jump Off. So the Jump Off is just a space really for me to sometimes have guests on to kind of discuss topical issues, topical news items, and just the things for me to get off my chest as well at the same time. And so normally, I would have had a guest with me when I was doing this, but I think over the last sort of 10 days, I would say, I've started to have a different feeling, and I needed to get a few things off my chest as well. So I'm just gonna go into a little. I mean, I'm free flowing on this as well, so I decided to record it. I was gonna just do it as an audio only and just to put on Spotify and all the other streaming sites, but I think the more I thought about it, I wanted to just have like video. People absorb this in different ways as well, which is a bit crazy how this is just growing and growing as well. Really, what started out as just a bit of a shonk, a bit of a plaything. Some people actually follow and listen, which I really, really appreciate. And just it's an amazing feeling sometimes when people talk to you about it and particular things, or they want to know about a guest, and I talk about it. So thank you again for that. Okay, so I'll go into probably the last 8 days really from what's been going on. About 8 days ago, we had the school shooting in America, and when you got young kids, sometimes it hits home a little bit more. Not to say for those people who don't have kids, it doesn't. I just think sometimes when you go into that scenario and you can feel it as a parent, it digs a little bit deeper. And if you got nephew and nieces, you know exactly what I'm saying as well. I'm making that clear. But you got a scenario where somebody goes into a school. The guy just shot his grandma, been telling people there's warning signs, and then he travels to a school, and then 21 people he ended up killing eventually. But then you hear the stories of some of the children coming out, smearing themselves with blood, to pretend that they were dead. The police force not taking so much time to go into these buildings to help people out. It just, for me, it really, we're used to these, unfortunately, we're used to hearing about school shootings and all these kind of things. But I think this one really dug a little bit deeper. And at that time, I was really, really, really sad as well. Really sad about it. The discussion around gun laws. You'll have the NRA, which is the National Rifle Association, I think they're called, but they are a very powerful lobby in America, and they wield quite a lot of power. And all those same rhetoric, those arguments start coming out again. How it shouldn't affect their constitution. It's a right. And that debate's going to rage on forever and a day, I feel. But when you think about it, that children were losing their life, and that still is not enough for people to change their policy on, or even their thinking. Where else can you go? Where else can you go in terms of your thinking? But yeah, I was, and the other thing, and it's a common theme that I'll get to in the end, which is the way that it's reported everywhere, the way that it's become media content. It's I think for me, that's a really uncomfortable modern trait that's coming in now, exploiting vulnerability, tragedy for clicks and bait. Now, at this point in time, me even talking about it on this platform is hypocritical as well, because I'm doing the same thing. But I think it's also to remember of the source of where you get your information from. There's a different way about talking about things. No matter what the subject is, I think people will know whether someone's genuine or not, in the majority of the time. I think so. As as a parent, you're feeling it even more. The next day, there was the Sue Gray report came out with all the, with all the government having their parties, etc. during that whole guidance. And I don't really want to go into the ins and outs of it, but it you go back into that frame of a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, where you were hearing about people, loved ones who were dying at the same time, particularly sort of the elderly. And it was, it's a very, I still believe there's still a lot of trauma, social trauma. I mean, you get that in a really different version where somebody is shaking hand. You don't even know what they're doing. Are they firms in you? Are they shaking your hand? Are they touching elbows? Are they just nodding your head? That kind of social confusion is still there. But it just, it harked back. It took your mind back to a different kind of place. So already at this point, you're dealing with young people who are tragic. You're dealing with older people in my thinking, in my brain, which is obviously tragic as well. And then at the next day, I ended up going to the podcast show in London, which was, I was really excited to go to there. It was a chance to probably just meet other creators, to kind of talk about, the different things. And I thought, at the end of the day, if you're going to do something, do it properly. So if with this podcast, I always try and do the best I do. It costs me money to put this out, so I'm not. There's not millions of pounds streaming in, because if it was, trust me, I'd probably still be doing this, but you'll see a different kind of version of it. So I went there really excited. I mean, some of my first observations when I get there was that I was the only brown face there. I think there was a couple others, to be honest, to be fair. But it was really high-powered exec individuals there, organizations, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon. And I got to see Louis through, and that was he's one of my heroes, to be honest. I've always kind of loved the way he does his interviews. And I that kind of style is one that I try to emanate and trying to be like as well. I also got to meet another hero. So I did get a message as I was putting these pictures up. People kept saying, "How many heroes do you actually have?" And I was like, "That's a good point, actually." I met Johnny Vaughan, and when I got to meet him, he was one of the rare smiles I had on that day, to be fair. I said, "Oh man, thanks, man. During the childhood, you lot made me laugh so much." And he actually took the time out to say, "Oh, how you do?" To speak to me, ask me about the podcast, and then he did it. He did agree, and I have had message saying that he wants to come on. So hopefully that comes out. But it was really good. When sometimes I've said it on the other episodes about never meet your heroes, but this time I could quite honestly say it was a really positive experience, and that was really good. But I left there feeling a little bit empty, where I just felt this whole, people are asking me, how do you describe your podcast? And I really shit myself. I didn't know how to describe this. This is just a plaything for me, where I wanted to interview people who I wanted to do. And what I really remembered during that conversation, it was all very business orientated. And I come from a philosophy that if you enjoy something, you'll always put 100% into it. And if it works out, then yeah, you'll get, it will hopefully earn you some money. And everything like that I've done, whether it's doing a drugs conference or working in the music industry, if you try and help people as much as you can, and you do it from your heart, and you do it with the right intentions, then you'll get that back. And financially, it should pay for you at some stage. But I left there kind of, feeling a little bit underwhelmed that there's a whole gap in the market that these big organizations don't necessarily kind of go into. And it really bugged me. It's still bugging me. When you go somewhere, it's like when you're going to go meet your friends, or you're going to go to a party, and it gets hyped up too much on your WhatsApp group. And then the day happens and you're actually being honest to yourself, oh, that was shit, man. It was all right. It wasn't as good as what you think. And I made that mistake. I hyped it in my head going, yeah, this is all right. I mean, it was good in terms of I met a couple of the people. Ripinda was one who's been on here before. In fact, Prash and Sunny have both been, they've all three of them have been on the podcast before. So I managed to kind of catch up with them and have a discussion. And it was really good. And, when you, from that side of it, you speak with, especially creative minds like this, and you try and learn as much as you can, from them, and especially their opinions and what they got to say. Really makes a difference in terms of what you try and do. I'm just gonna have some glass of water. I've never done this before. I'll give you a warning now. I don't know how long this is gonna be, but I'm just gonna have some water now. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that was that, and then the experience. I think the experience over the weekend, and so I'm recording this the day after Sidhu's funeral. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Sidhu Moosewala. So on the Sunday when I first heard the news, I was at I was with my son at a kid's birthday party, and for once I couldn't get reception on my phone. And when the news came in, I was actually sitting with another parent. And their phone started blowing up. And firstly, I was like, how the hell did you get reception? And then on a WhatsApp group, I could see the words that he had in his WhatsApp group. And when you something is significant because you know where you were when you first heard it, I think that is the key indicator when you know that something's going to impact you. This means more. This is a bit different. So he put it. He said, "Oh, he said Sidhu's dead," and I was like, "Nah." And then there was a report which says shots fired at. And I thought, oh, okay, fair enough. He's been not fair enough, but someone's tried to have a go at him. At that moment, I'm in a bit of a blur, even to the parent who's telling me what's happened, and I end up luckily for the party was kind of finishing, so I went into the car. All of a sudden, the reception, my phone just lights up like a disco light, and I'm sitting there and I didn't realize, but the kids around us were hearing some of the conversation as well. And this is the bit which was like, I felt it even more, and the learning that in your environment and all these things, this raw emotion came between a bunch of us who were just talking about it, and I think we were all in this kind of shock of what's going on, and then all these things come through, and then there was this kind of perverse way of people sending footage. Like, the more gruesome it was ridiculous. And what the first thing that came out was there's people standing there taking videos of this guy. This is a hero, an icon, whatever we want to describe him, and I'll get into it a bit later. But people are making videos of this guy, live streaming, doing all this stuff. And the frustration and anger, where this isn't a new thing. This is a cultural thing. This is something that you see quite a lot, where I saw footage a few months back where this guy was drowning and somebody just got out their phone and just filming it. And you're like, no attempt to help. Could have used the phone to phone the police, the ambulance, whatever, rescue service. And you just think, is this what it's all about? That it's about filming what's going on and where we were at that time. And I think some of the reports, and I could have this totally wrong because where it's corroborated from, but there was a period of time, let's say 30 minutes from when he was being shot. I think in the statement, his dad said that he took him to the hospital. And then there was another bit of time before he got treated. And, and based on the autopsy and the information come out, 24 bullets and etc. you know, I don't think that was survivable anyway. Even in my, I don't, I ain't even got an opinion on it. I'm not an expert in that, but you know, if somebody's shot 24 times, I think there's a strong chance they ain't going to survive either way. And that started this snowball effect in terms of this kind of shock that was going around, not in terms of just myself, but even my peers, my friends, everyone who having this discussion. I picked up my parents from the airport. One of the first questions, man, well, is it true? Did it happen? I was like, yeah, this is it. And there's a bit of quiet, and then, you know, eventually we start talk about other things. I think I went to bed that night, and the next day I woke up and I felt even worse. I listened to Harp's Calls. One of the rare times I actually listened to the BBC Asian network. I don't know what it was. I just got up early. I was just scrolling through, and my timeline started to get filled up with, and I was like, "This ain't good for me, man. This ain't good for me." So I ended up, like, you know, changing the channel and doing other stuff, and then I listened to Harp's you know, a tribute from there, and I think that was a tipping point where I thought, this ain't. I could just feel a change in my thinking, and the heavy heart was still there. And it was, you know, it was significant even in my household. Like my wife and kids, they could tell that I was a bit more quiet than normal. I was speaking to people about it. I just couldn't concentrate on anything, you know, to the point where I was doing like a work team meeting, and I couldn't even spill out the words what I was saying. And I had to apologize to him, say, look, this is what's going on, blah, blah, blah. Now, I made it clear that I didn't have any day-to-day dealings with this guy, but I knew enough people, I knew enough stories, I knew enough about him, people who worked very close with him, and mostly the impact that he had on me in terms of like music and the journey. The I think the next kind of stage was, I was getting random phone calls from my friends. You know, one which was, they already knew the answer. They were asking it, but the reason why they were calling was to basically speak about Sidhu. And so this sense of grief, people are grieving out there, and they don't necessarily know how to. So when somebody dies, especially in like South Asian community, people might descend on the house, and you have the arena to kind of collectively grieve together. I think this one, everyone just doesn't know where to go. What do you do? I think from a social aspect, obviously, like if you're religious, you have the Gurdwara, for example, a temple or anything to go and collect your thoughts as well. But I think also, like socially, it's not a common kind of thing, a scenario that you're going through. But then there's the other bit as a parent, that my kids, especially my son, sort of knew it was Sidhu was probably one of his first artists that he was familiar with, alongside Jazzy B, of course. And he knew about Sidhu, and then to have that, do you have the death conversation? You know, how do you have that conversation? It's a horrible conversation anyway, but with a child, it's limited. Should you even have that conversation with a child for them to know about it? The thing was, the problem, what was happening was on everyone's timelines, and anyone who's calling, we're all talking about the same thing, and kids pick up on anything, man. You think like these kids will know about Roblox, the latest hack on Roblox, they know everything. And if I don't say it, I don't have that question, there'll be someone in their class who talks about it. And now, do you do you have that conversation, to have that informed choice with them? You know, these are loads of sort of things that was going on. Now, the past few days when I was talking about all the other stuff, and I also missed Ray Liotta. Ray Liotta was an actor that, as a kid, when I was growing up, you know, in part of Goodfellas, he signified another part of my life. So all of a sudden, with Sidhu, you've got multi-generational kind of events happening in the last 8 days that is significant, building up this kind of perfect storm. And I think it was a time when, from social media, the first time I would say actively that I said I had to get off it. even with this podcast, I'm not even sure that I haven't promoted that I'm doing a podcast at all. I think I'm just gonna just drop it at the time and say, yeah, here it is. Um, but there was like so many different aspects. So last night, so on the Tuesday, I ended up going to Brit Asia TV were called to say that they're starting to do this kind of panel. And so Juggy D was there, Stephen So, DJ Azza, myself, and Tej Samra. So Tej has been on the podcast as well. And as we're having these discussions, I think it was more about, it was the first time we publicly grieved, and I actually felt better. I didn't like TV stations streaming the funeral the way that they did. The dead body pics was just too much for me. You know, some people could be tolerable, but for me, I just couldn't do it. And it was every single post that was coming. There was a Sidhu, 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 Sidhu. So there was no space to have that to grieve or to have that privacy. And then you think of the parents and what they're doing, especially when the mother was doing his hair, preparing his hair for the funeral. That was get out, sorry, and then his dad taking off his bog. That was too much. You know, that was too much for me. I just couldn't, and I just thought they need the space to grieve at the moment, because you just think, you know, what would you do in that situation? You think of your parents, you think of so many different scenarios for you to think about, to put to, you know, what the emotions are just ridiculous. And in one sense, this is why I was doing this podcast, because I've got to get it out. they ain't gonna, it's not for, I think there's a few people like me. Everyone who I was speaking to, there was a lot of people who were feeling exactly the same. Do we have a vigil? Do we do this? Do we do that? But I felt yesterday was that source, you know, the place where you go to place to actually discuss and get it out. I felt a lot better doing that. Like, I can't listen to his songs. I'm weird like that. I hear the song, I can't listen. I have to switch off. I need space. I want to fast forward 2 weeks so I can, you know, the timeline cleans up a little bit. And then, not to say that the movement for the justice for him is a separate thing, so that, you know, we'll get to that. But let's break it down. Sidhu was a political activist. He was a wordsmith. He was a musical genius. He was an actor. He did everything this guy did. Very vocal, wasn't scared to say his opinion. And there was clear distinction between his on-stage presence and behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, a very quiet guy, very reserved, almost borderline shy. And then on stage, a different animal, different beast, dominated stages, and that's how, you know, a lot of people kind of will remember him. You know, one of the first kind of big names about talking about the Kisan movement, and I think, you know, he says it openly himself of how he was heavily inspired. He was with like Tupac, and then going out virtually in identical circumstances. The significance, the ominous sort of things that have happened. 295 date he died. Then you've got the last ride cover pic. It was Tupac's, you know, BMW, where he had as his cover design. The similarities are just scary when you really look into it. And I think what's important here at this point is it's very raw, and people are still I'm still processing it. And when you get down to it, those conspiracy theories were gonna gain more and more momentum. But at the end of the day, the guy's passed. And I think what we have to kind of concentrate, and when the timing is right, is about the legacy and the movement forward. And look on kind of the memories of what he did and what he achieved. It's such, he'd been in the game for a long time, but blew up, you know, in a kind of 5-6 year kind of space. I mean, he would, when he passed, like Drake sharing his stuff. I mean, that should be no way of measuring somebody's lifetime and legacy, but the likes of Drake, the mainstream, sharing their thoughts, all the rumored collaborations of what this guy was gonna do, and he put Punjabi music, Punjabi language on the map, you know, and we're going to see quite a lot. I did my predictions. You're going to see quite a lot of releases coming out when the timing's right. The collabs, all these kind of things are going to be there. And I think what it's done is, with the younger generation, have gained their Jamkila, who died I think he was 27 when he died, and was immortalized. I think what's going to happen with Sidhu is that whatever the narrative was to remove him, they've cemented his legacy and even further, and his legend will get even bigger and bigger. He'll be one of those rites of passage that, if you're into Punjabi music, or even as an icon with Punjab history, he will be considered at some stage, will have a narrative in that story. Whether you agree with what he did or disagree, you can't ignore him. That is 100% fact. And I think as that music industry will kind of evolve, and they'll have their conversations around lyrical content about all of these kind of things. Some I think are ridiculous, some I think need addressing. I think that's going to be a future that I think we all need to be a part of, and kind of to be dictated to. I'm sure in the next coming weeks, there were different guests that I've got coming on. The topic will come, but I just thought I just needed to get a little bit of that off my chest, and see whether it was the same what everybody else is kind of feeling, to be honest, as well. So yeah, I'll bring it to a close. So thanks, guys, for listening, liking, subscribing, etc. And I'll catch you on my next episode. Peace.